Hey folks, so today I want to continue on from our theme from the other day. We're going to talk about some interesting ideas, articles, tweets, posts I've found recently, and some of the things I've been thinking about recently. Um, I'll start with one idea that I hadn't really internalized up until the last few days. I'm still kind of struggling with it, right? This idea of passion and excitement becoming a liability for you instead of an asset, right? In the base case, it is an asset. You absolutely need that. That's like, makes you light up, makes you pursue something despite all of the hardships, all of the challenges, right? Makes you more resilient to failures, makes you more resilient to setbacks, right? So it's super important to have that. Um, Gives you that positive energy that you need, right? Because discipline alone is not going to be able to cut it, right? When you're operating at that level where you actually need to be executing at the very top, day in, day out, hour in, hour out, that's just not going to suffice, right? And you need that. I mean, many people might not need that, uh, but and I want to become one of those people that wouldn't need it, but I do see so much beauty and passion, right? It's so funny. I just want to be driven purely by purpose, logically arriving at my purpose, determining what's the best use of my limited time on the planet, and following that purpose, striving to achieve that purpose. But over the last few years, I started kind of seeing the beauty of passion, right? And I think it's going to happen more and more where I appreciate the power of passion more and more over the next few years because a few things are about to happen. I expect to happen, anyways. But over the last few months, I've been blinded by passion. I've been blinded by excitement. Right, I was not looking at certain signals. I don't want to get into the details, the nitty gritty of it, but that passion had blinded me. Right, I was not looking at the facts as I should have been looking at them. Um, I was I wouldn't call myself deluded by passion, though some people can be, right? But excitement, because excitement, by its very nature, it's an emotion which amplifies the good of an opportunity and it minimizes the facts which might change that narrative of that thing being so good, right? Which is what was happening. So I'd made a few calls in the last few months and I'd been hoping for certain outcomes from those particular calls. Let's put it that way. Things had were not transpiring the way I was expecting them to, but I was still excited. I was kind of creating this. You could almost call it the fake. I wouldn't call it a fake excitement, though a part of it was, which isn't really serving me well. Right. So, what's the lesson here? The lesson is that you don't want to be blinded by passion. You don't want to be blinded by excitement. You want to keep it contained. And you want to be really brutally honest with yourself every single day, right? I mean, some of the mistakes I made was I used to have this ritual where I would sit down with myself, I would just have a chat with myself, talking about where exactly are we, right? Are we being honest with ourselves? Because it's so easy to fool ourselves, right? Like we can create these fictions, we can create these narratives that might serve a part of something that we're trying to do, right? But that might not serve the whole of it. That might not serve the longer term goals that we might have. And that's what happened with me with the last few months. Had I looked at reality without those rose tinted glasses, I would have made some difficult calls. I would have taken, but that would have served me a lot better. So that was a big lesson, right? Big lesson. So the big lesson in a few short sentences is that passion and excitement are great, right? You absolutely need them. Well, some people might not need them. Like Newton, for example, right? Like I think based on my reading of his life, and he was obviously a very solitary person, and so you might not be able to get a really good insight into the psyche of that, uh, into psyche. But based on what we do know, he did not have passion, right? He had a certain love for it. There's different kinds of passion, I guess. He probably did have an irrational passion is this irrational love for something. Um, and based on the fact that he absolutely loved alchemy, right? And he would just spend hours and hours, well, years of his life pursuing those and his theological interest, and not to speak of obviously his discoveries in physics, I'd say that he probably was passionate. But I can also find so many counterexamples of people who are just doing something for the love of it without really being passionate or excited about it. Because sometimes love doesn't really need that excitement, right? It doesn't really need that passion, which is more expressed love, I guess, is a way to put it. It's a more visible kind of love. Oh, I mean, obviously, like, even the other kind of love can be visible through action, but I guess it's more of an extroverted kind of love for something, or for something for that matter, right? You can be passionate about a person. Um, yeah, yeah. So moving on to the next one, I came across this really cool quote the other day by Miles Davis, who apparently is a jazz artist. If you play a wrong note, it's the next note that you play which determines whether it's a good note or a bad note, right? Which is so true in life. We get stuck in these local minimas, right? When we make a mistake, when we have a failure, we tend to get stuck in these local minimas, not really internalizing the ebb and flow nature of life. But every valley, there is going to be a high. There's going to be a high following that, right? If you do have the necessary wherewithal and the will and the desire and or the passion for that matter to make that climb happen. And so this is true not just obviously it's true for music, right? Like in music it's literally true. Like a note by itself doesn't really mean anything. It's about what surrounds that particular note that makes it beautiful or that makes it, just ugly. And that is also very true for life, right? Like your mistakes and your failures could become the lowlights could become highlights because they could make your eventual wins that much more beautiful, that much more glorious, and that much more rewarding. Now this one's just a pure fun one, right? GPT file. I mean, this was obviously a while back. You could say the same thing on GPT-6. GPT file. It'll be smarter than you. It's smarter than you. It's more knowledgeable than you, but it won't know. It doesn't know what it's like to rap out 225, to ring out a V12, to sip Don Perignon, to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of the women. That's a banger. This is something I want to talk about a bit longer. So I guess I'll do a separate piece on this, right? Like the perceived intelligence of AI. I think, yeah, I think it's best to do this separately because this is something I've thought about more than I thought about a few other things that we're going to talk about today, and I would want to spend 30 minutes talking about this. So we'll leave it for another time. Born too low IQ to build AGI, born too high IQ to complain about AI water usage, but born with the perfect IQ to say you got 2 years to escape the permanent underclass to anytime a new model is released. My days, oh my days. Oh. Okay, so this was a really fascinating paper which came out in August at Meta of all places, because they are the ones who will probably want to monetize this the hardest, right? So the paper, they built a model called a Tri-Modal Brain Encoder, which is the first deep neural network trained to predict brain responses to stimuli across multiple modalities, cortical areas, and individuals. The approach combines pre-trained representations of several foundational models from Metatext, Llama 3.0, audio, wave-to-vector boards from Seamless, and video, VJPA2, to predict a very large amount, 80 hours per subject, of spatio-temporal fMRI brain responses to movies acquired by the Courtois Neuromod project. So, in simple words, they train this model to predict your brain's response to any piece of media, right? be it movies, be it visual media, obviously videos, audio, text. This is insane, right? Like you take like just project this into the year 2035, you can see positive use cases, negative use cases, right? Obviously, if it's meta, you know what to expect. But no, one important caveat, by the way, this was trained on just a few, like lots of brains, obviously, lots of people, but it's a general predictor. So based on the training data that I got from those people, it's now able to predict this for majority of people. I don't know majority, I haven't really looked into that, but it seems like it's they're implying that's the majority of people. There'll always be people who wired very differently, who these models won't be able to predict the brain activity for, right? That could be like 10% of humanity. But based on what I'm gathering from this, without really reading the paper, seems like this can apply to most people. But forget about that, right? In the year 2035, like people are gonna wear Ray-Bans with Meta Ray-Bans with, X non-intrusive BCIs and all sorts of things, right? And so they'll have direct access to your brain. When I say they, I mean OpenAI, Meta, etc. And so you can imagine like content and ads and movies, etc., created just for you in real time without you having to utter a single word. Now, we got to think about the mechanism behind this, right? Like, would it be like would a movie be constructed in real time? Right, so I'm watching a scene, right? No, nothing's been written beyond that scene. So okay, let's just drop me. And so yesterday I was dreaming about. I had a really surreal dream the other day. Actually, give me a second. Yeah, so this was. I haven't really been having a ton of dreams lately, but this was so weird. I could not make any sense of it. I mean, I can make some sense of it, but okay. So what happened is, I was tied. I was on the road, where three people they had tied me up, and there was another person next to me. It was a stranger, and they were literally. This is a very violent dream, so rated PG-18 or whatever. But they were cutting this person up. They were killing him, and it was for some reason that was painful. I mean, not for some reason. Obviously, no, another human being tortured, but in the dream they were having a connection that I had with this person, and he was being cut and killed by these three evil people, right? And I was just tied on this. It was nighttime, and I was begging for my life. I've never had a dream like this, and like I'm smiling because like I just don't have violent dreams like these, and don't know what happened. I absolutely don't know what happened, but I was begging for my life, and after they're done with him, they pretty much kill him, torture him. They're about to start with me. They bring out some tools, and just through a miracle, I'm able to free myself, and I make a run for it. And I'm running through these streets, and I've never seen these streets. Absolutely everything is new, right? And I'm running without my shorts on, and like I'm looking behind me, seeing whether they're following me. And some places they do, like there's like a cat and mouse race at first, right? And that's when I wake up. I just absolutely don't know what to make of this. Like the other day, I was in a dream. I was stuck in an airport, which kind of makes sense. I mean, that dream made a ton of sense, right? Like I was just in an airport with a lot of surreal airplanes around me. The airport itself was very surreal looking. So that made some sense. I mean, some dreams are so weird that most dreams are so weird that you just don't know what to make of it. But this one, where a person was killed right next to me, was unable to help them, right? And I wasn't even able to like kill these, like protect myself against it. I was just running away from the threats, which you ideally don't want to do, right? Like you want to fight back. So that was very weird. But to get back to the point, the meta thing. Imagine, right, that's a point at which the movie starts, right? Like that in that particular dream. Now the AI can take over. The AI knows, well, the chip, the hardware plus the AI. That's its model trained on me. It's not just a random AI. It's an AI which has been trained on me. It knows my preferences, my psyche, me very deeply, right? Essentially, And so I can create something in real time that would be the most appealing to me. Its reward function in that moment would be to maximize. I mean, when you're watching a movie, what do you like when you're watching a horror movie? Are you maximizing dopamine? I didn't think so, right? Like a jump scare is not supposed to give you a dopamine hit, is it? Like when you're watching a romantic movie, obviously you got release of oxytocin and love hormones. When you're watching an action movie, your violent impulse as a man, you know, is triggered because men have been very violent, deeply ingrained that behavior. So I can guess that. Thriller, the reward of learning a new piece of information, right? I guess there's a dopamine hit with that. With horror, like you see people being killed, right? Like just slashed and all of that. I don't know where the reward would be. I mean, I've thought about the subject a lot about why are horror movies so appealing, and we don't want to get into that very long. Uh, there are different reasons, right? There's just so many different reasons depending on the person that you're speaking with. But the point is that it probably would want to maximize the states that you would want to maximize, right? I think that's the way it would work. Like if you're the kind of person who's very romantic, idealistic, then it would probably create a movie of that sort. If you're someone who's very dark and dark triad, it would create a movie of that sort, etc. Yeah. So I'd imagine something of that sort. So there's this phenomena which this guy's just expressed so succinctly. Most people I know gain like 20 IQ points when advising their friends' lives and lose 20 IQ points when doing strategy for their own lives, right? I mean, there's a very obvious reason for this. Like, we're blinded by our delusions, by our biases, and when we see another person, we don't know what those biases and that person's delusions are. We see them as, this person with these problems, right? So we tend to simplify it. It's like a physics approach, essentially. And when you take a physics approach, imagine a spherical cow, right? We think of that person, even though it's a friend, we still don't know the inner world, right? We don't know the inner struggles. Like you just can't, right? Like you can only, like, even if you're best of friends, there's only so much the language can do for you to really understand, empathize with, not, well, forget about empathize, but really deeply understand that person's makeup. And so, when you tend to simplify, obviously you'll be able to, like, the solution is going to be it's going to be very neat, right? And when it comes to your problems and trying to solve your problems, there's just so many roadblocks. And you might be able to rationalize, because again, the reason you got those problems, let's say, you got a habit that you want to break, but you've not been able to, right? There are deep psychological reasons why that habit exists. And part of your brain is fighting against your impulse to solve that problem. So in a way, that 20 point IQ reduction comes from your own part of your own mind fighting against that. While in your friend's case, everything's working in tandem to solve that problem, and you already simplified that problem. So obviously the solution is going to be super easy, super neat, right? Like, okay, you want to quit smoking? Simple as that, right? Like, just buy these patches, do these things, whatever. And so yeah, so that's a phenomenon. What's the solution, right? That's always the next step. So there's this hack: create a friend called Mike. Describe all of your problems as if they're Mike's. Give Mike advice. Now follow it. Mike is your imaginary friend you use to detach from yourself. It works really well. I've never done this, but I can see the merits of it, right? Like, if I get detached from my delusions, from my biases, from this baggage of me, I can look at my problems in isolation. And I can also do it with the rationalizations that keep me stuck in those problem loops and patterns. And that might be all you need to have a shift in perspective to be able to have that insight. Sometimes an insight has to be followed by execution, right? Like habit building, like brick by brick, tiny step by tiny step. You're not gonna, if it's a habit problem, if it's a pattern problem, if it's a recurring problem, behavioral problem, it's not gonna be fixed just by an insight. That'll be the big moment, right? That'll be the breakthrough, obviously, but you still need to do the work after that. And so this would work really well. Another approach to this, another way to do this would be to imagine a 20, 30, or well, a version of you that's 5 years or 10 years older than you are, right? And asking yourself, how would my 5-year-old, how would my 40-year-old, 50-year-old self solve this problem, right? And now you're kind of channeling that person without the constraints that have been put on your current self by your current mind. And again, so you're going to be able to arrive at these insights. You might be able to, having that reframe might be able to get you to those breakthroughs, and those breakthroughs are like 30% of the work. And sometimes that's the main thing, right? A lot of people will not take a step more than the breakthrough, but the breakthrough is like the main bit of thing. So that's interesting. So I've got one last thing. OpenAI was built as this vehicle to achieve AGI and distribute its benefits to people, right? It's a two-part goal. Part one is implicit in the mission is being the first to AGI. Because whoever is the first to AGI, there are different kinds of dynamics, but the most likely dynamic, because we're nowhere close to AGI, right? At least it seemed you had some. When you talk to ChatGPT 5, you feel like you're so close to AGI. It doesn't learn, there's no persistent memory, there's no problem solving, there's no long term horizon planning. And back to the first one, right? It doesn't learn, which is the main condition for a truly intelligent system. So at this point, it's a lot more than a stochastic parrot, right? Like people who say it's a stochastic parrot, like Gary Marcuses of the world and whatnot, they're missing the big picture. And it's useful in so many domains, right? Like it's better than most humans in probably most tasks. It just can't do a complete job in most roles, right? Like when you need, there's a lot of stuff which is artificially created. I wouldn't say artificially, but there's these models will need to have scaffolding around them to be able to fulfill complete jobs. But OpenAI has recent actions, right, where they've been launching ChatGPT, Sora and Erotica and ads and all of that. But also, it's just one of two things, right? One is that they're not truly AGI pilled. They obviously see the value in AI as a technology, but they don't believe that we are close to AGI. Or they believe they're just a profit maximizing company, and they just want to use the most powerful piece of technology humanity's ever invented, or humanity will ever invent, which is AI, to achieve the shareholder maximization principle, right? The second argument is that they are AGI pills, but they think it'll take billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions of dollars more, and hence we need to make these choices, like, we need to grow the company without necessarily achieving AGI, before achieving AGI, to be able to maximize the chance of achieving AGI. So in the shorter term, what this reveals is that they don't think AGI is happening anytime soon. So that's very interesting. That is very interesting, but because again, the signals from the lab from OpenAI, that some of these people are just hype merchants, Sam Altman and some of the other people, but still, looking at the trajectory of growth of AI over the last few years, you almost got bought into the fiction, right? But then you realize that AGI is going to be a series of S curves on top of each other. We're just in this S curve, we're in the takeoff phase of this particular S curve period, and now we are going to start slowly plateauing, and the next phase will require, the next S curve takeoff will require a fundamental breakthrough. When you realize that, you see that it's just not happening anytime soon, at least not in the next few years. But what the AI systems that we have, they can do enough on their own to achieve like some definitions of AGI, and they can do enough to kind of disrupt the labor market substantially, which changes models of the future, right, radically. Like you can't expect to have GPT-5 like technologies with scaffolding not to disrupt the labor market. So you got to be prepared for it. So these latest pivots that OpenAI has had, they're quite revolutionary in showing us that even in the top labs, or maybe they're hiding something, but at least by the actions, look at the actions, not the words. They do think that it's going to take a while before we get to true AGI. So that's interesting. On that note, I'll call it a day and we'll catch up soon later. Take care.